sustainable development. So it's like putting together the present and the future of artificial intelligence and sustainable development, and how we can make the world a better place with the technologies rather than exacerbate human rights or the misuse the earth resources and so on. So we're already jumping to the storytellers, and I want to invite on the floor Josh Jackson. He's the vice president of 6 Clicks, the startup, and he will discuss the algorithm to protect supply chains from modern slavery. Please, Josh, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite, and I'm glad to be here. I am in Washington, D.C., in the United States. And I guess I'll start with, I'm also the co-founder of the Artificial Intelligence Association here in Washington, D.C., in terms of educating policymakers and lawmakers on artificial intelligence. And at the same time, I teach at a few different universities on artificial intelligence, law, and regulation. And I say all this to say, I think there's a few different approaches. One is based on education, and kind of this 3 sort of pronged approach that I've taken on educating government about artificial intelligence, educating business or future, quote, business leaders of America, if you will, or the globe about artificial intelligence. And then third is sort of this practical understanding of how to use artificial intelligence. And from that, with 6 Clicks, we're based as well out of the European Union and the Asia Pac, as we sort of use artificial intelligence to look at supply chains, look at laws, look at compliance, and so forth. So that's kind of a brief overview of who I am and where I come from. One thing that I wanted to think about today, and the reason why I talk about education being the biggest, would be probably the biggest challenge that I have met is changing people's behavior, right? And if we can change our behavior, then we can change the culture. Now, from a modern slavery standpoint, it's really hard to conceive that people are interested in modern slavery. People are interested in sort of the oppression of other people for money, right? If we think about what the definitions are of modern slavery, it's trafficking of persons or human trafficking, or sort of these thoughts of the movement of people that in the state of servitude. And that is unconceivable from my standpoint. Now, since that does occur, then, and that seems to have an economic value to it, then laws need to be established to combat that. And how do we push forward on the laws to combat modern slavery? So from a practical sense, we developed basically a compliance tool that uses artificial intelligence to protect supply chains from modern slavery risk, and put in these assessments to link to regulations built into sort of this vendor management, right? So if you can show with evidence that your vendors, from a business aspect, or those that you're dealing and making money from are not complying with the modern slavery requirements, then we can sort of confront those individuals. So that is how, in a broad overview of how we've been looking at it in comparing laws, regulations, and establishing this chain of evidence and transparency within the supply chain. And you can kind of assess over the third parties across the supply chain. So that's the tool in general. Now, how long did it take to bring this to reality? Well, for us, we've been around for almost 2 years in developing the artificial intelligence to track laws and regulations and then get it into the market. As I said, it's really challenging because at the same time, we need to be educating lawmakers and businesses on modern slavery to change their interaction with it. And from that, we've seen in Australia the Modern Slavery Act of 2018. Now, what is significant is that they established this, but at the same time, if you look at the act, and I'll read the part of it, the act requires entities based or operating in Australia, which have an annual consolidated revenue of more than $100 million. That is not what every business operates under. Even illegal businesses, right? Are they all within $100 million of annual revenue? You can go to the United States and we have the same, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. And we have a lot of these starting to be developed. And I think there's just more that needs to be done in terms of looking at laws, developing the cost and benefit, as well as telling everyone's story that has gone through human trafficking. We've seen success in, say, the fight on drugs. We've seen success on the fight against tobacco use through taxation. And I think over time, as businesses start to think about what are the norms that we want to interact with, and can we use tools to show the benefit, then we can start making major changes within the modern slavery, so to speak. So those, I guess, one of the biggest success stories, or sort of the best results, is that we're bringing to the front of businesses and saying, let's put in a policy, let's start interacting with the businesses and suppliers that you're interacting with, and make sure that they are compliant with these laws and regulations, so that they have in the front of the mind that they're keeping up with it. So that's my story in essence of education. And I think the more we can start using these education tools and get out there and teach people about artificial intelligence, then we know that it's starting to transform how businesses do their work. And in many cases, the advancements in AI are lowering the cost of some of the major regulation functions, but general business functions that are improving the business decisions and making sort of those norm changes and behavioral changes that can be more consistent and predictable across the supply chain as we continue to fight modern slavery. So with that, thank you very much for having me here, and look forward to connecting with some of you.
Thank you very much, George, for your presentation. We're going to go through all the storytellers for the first time, and then you will be able to write down your question in the chat, and we, together with Ramon, will moderate that questions and ask to our storytellers in the last 10 minutes. So now I'm inviting John Castro on the floor, who is a software engineer at First Factory, and he will discuss the project GMC Engine, which is the algorithm for searching for missing kids around the world. Please, John, the floor is yours.
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So just give me 1 second here. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, everything.
Yeah, we can see.
Cool. So it's a pleasure to be here with you. My name is John Castro. I'm a senior software engineer and technical lead in First Factory. That is a company based in New York. We basically do software development in a outsourcing way. And I'm the GMC engine development team lead, and I have been from the beginning of the project. So I'm going to talk about GMC engine and the change that it's doing in the work. First of all, GMC engine is a project from the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And it's an inspiration from their CTO, Micah Chin. When Mike joined ICMEC, he inherited the database of 30 countries with a lot of cases, but the database was just there. There was no any interaction. You could go to internet, see the cases, print the posters, but there was nothing automated or proactive in those cases. So he and ICMEC decided to that the world really needed a technology that would act like a parent, looking always for that child until he appears. So what is GMC Engine? GMC Engine is a platform that combines artificial intelligence, machine learning, and digital advertising technologies for creating alerts to find missing children. In the platform, you can create cases. Well, the case managers around the world can create cases, have the ability to search about in the cases, look at that database and find particulars and do restrictions, show all the cases, the closed cases. That's something that was not there before. There was not a database that could combine all the cases from the children around the world, from the missing children. In the platform, you can create alerts that work similar to the Amber alerts, but works around the world. The platform uses geo-targeting and dynamic app insertions to get the alerts in front of the right communities at critical times. And actually, in this year, there have been more than 3,000 alerts that have been issued and have been displayed. Those alerts around 4 billions in around 4 billions of ads. Also, in the platform, you can use the machine learning and the artificial intelligence that basically scores millions of images from the dark web and the clear web. And it's going to match with the face of the child that is missing. This is going to provide the law enforcement and the NGOs with leads about where the child is. The image is going to put the information about the image location, the original posting date, where the photo was taken, and device information from the whereabouts of the missing children. To bring this into reality, It took about 7 months to have the first version of GMC engine. With the help of the first factory development team, took about 5 months to have a soft release in the annual GMCN conference in Córdoba, Spain in November 2018. And then we could go in the production release with actual live cases from 30 countries in January 2019. We still continue improving our platform and the interactions with the platform. And this year we launched the mobile application for case managers for iOS and Android. This to make easier for case manager to have an engagement with their cases. How was possible? Basically, this project was possible thanks to the vision of the CTO of ACMEC, Mike Kachin, and the GMCN director, Caroline Homer. In addition to the technology partners like the Federation for Internet Alerts, Amazon Web Services, WebIQ, and of course the first factory team that includes JD Sanchez, Andres Mata, Esteban Valverde, Carolina de la Osa, and Jason Tiro. Some of the challenges that we faced and we are still facing, is the ability to expand our network. We know from the 30 GMCN members that over 1 million of children goes missing a year. And there is 190 countries. So we need to expand our network to have a realistic idea of how many missing children are in the world. Another challenge is to have a clear UI and user experience, because we are working with processes that involve complex IT solutions. And we need to integrate that into an accessible user interface for case managers around the world. Another challenge that we have been facing is to have all the platform working perfectly. We manage a lot of information. We obtain data automatically from different agencies. We do scrapping technologies to retrieve information from agencies where APIs are not available. And we process big sets of data, like, for example, thousands of images per minute. On the best results, on GMC Engine, we celebrate success through the recovery of children. And in our first year in production, 219 children were recovered. So far in 2020, there have been over 1,292 missing children recovered around the world. So I think we are making a difference. We are doing technology very good. We are doing technology for purpose. And that will be my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for your very interesting presentation. I think that's really amazing what you have been doing. I actually earlier shared your project on LinkedIn. It really got a lot of attention from the people, and that's why actually that was one of the major reasons why I wanted to invite you on the talk, to kind of inspire others to repeat the same and similar great results. So just I ask the audience to keep your questions for him for the last 10 minutes of our Q&A session. And right now I'm inviting Lavina Ramkinston on our floor, who is the board director of Air AI and founding partner and advisor of Tutti AI. And she will discuss today the algorithm for Society 5.0. Lavina, please, floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm dialing in from Johannesburg, South Africa. And if I can just quickly share my screen with everybody. Can everyone see that?
Yes. I can
Perfect.
see at least.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, welcome to our story about RAI and who we are, and how it all began. I guess responsibility around AI and the application for us, especially within the developing countries, has been quite a thing. So I decided to look a little bit deeper into the exact meaning around it, and what that would mean for us, right? We all know that around responsible AI, it's always been us having to do the right thing for society values and upliftments. But we decided to, unpack it in terms of understanding responsible AI, then understanding the technology, understanding what the impact areas are, and how best can we merge all these different worlds together. So, when we talk about responsible AI, I think there's 4 key fundamentals, which is around fairness, reliability, explainability, predictiveness, as well as flexibility of it. I find this is very interesting space because, we find ourselves having to observe the data, collect the data, and be able to connect the data to tell a story. And for us, that becomes really imperative. As one of the key areas within the developing country has been around data sets and very segmented areas, and then how do we, overcome those challenges? So we looked at, different use cases of them. If we look at our landscape in totality around the world, we've been seeing a lot of news articles around inappropriate use of AI, around the globe, as recent as even within South Africa, where a president says that AI can literally be the solution to solve out corruption. So having all of these things at the back of our mind, what is the landscape that we actually sit with, and where do we actually see ourselves? So trying to analyze and understand where the influences are coming from, we find that the Americas obviously use and are influenced by the large tech giants. We have Europe, who uses very much the individualistic approach. And then we have Asia, who's very much governmental approach. So kind of, the bigger question of where does actually Africa lie amongst this conversation, and how can we best then drive it? Then we had a look at some of our barriers. Those barriers would include things like, obviously governmental laws and issues around openness in terms of public data, legacy old legal systems, technology not actually being able to be up on par to the rest of the world, as well as human resources in terms of skills, as well as impact into society, when we're already fundamentally sitting with issues that the developed worlds have already solved to some extent. For us, the biggest one around it has been the acceptance of technology within this. How our smart municipality project came about. This is something that we have done in partnership with the foundation. And, this is something we decided to look at from a bottom-up approach in terms of creating a digital citizen for just a small municipality region of Gauteng, which sits within Johannesburg. And, what would that mean? And for us, it largely meant a relationship between our partners, governmental buy-in, as well as citizens. And those were the 3 kind of fundamental pillars that we worked around. How and why did we decide to do this? Everyone is gearing up very much into this digital world, and you being your own owner of your assets, right, as a citizen. So, how can we on small levels start churning away or biting at this larger pie. And I guess for us, it was around sustainable cities, international partnerships that actually drive the similar goals, trying to reduce some inequalities, and how we could actually then, use responsible consumption of a municipality facilities and infrastructures that's already in place. So for us, it's been literally taking this large picture of us as a citizen and trying to unpack where would we like to see things ease off, right? Whether it's from a healthcare perspective or buying something to, changing your home. But it was largely underwritten or had to be, governed by governmental departments or municipalities. And for us, within the African continent, that sometimes poses one of the largest problems for us. However, we have managed to do that by trying to segment it across the different municipalities and taking them, one stream at a time. And we tend to do this with a bit of backing through hackathons, making it a bit more exciting in the space, trying to gain more, interest from industries in terms of wanting to come on board. And in terms of our ecosystem, we've managed to create, some kind of form and, support in all these different areas that we want to tackle. And it's been quite large at, with a very small project just zoned in Gauteng. But I think for us, it's been very much a learning curve. And, we're going through a process at the moment of trying to build it up within Gauteng before we try to nationalize this. I think, having a good supportive ecosystem has been absolutely fundamental. It makes buy-in in terms of whether it's government or citizens or, public sector, private sector, much easier. And I think, through the Empire Partner Foundation, they've been quite fundamental and key in terms of helping bridge all of these partnerships together. So thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time. And I look forward to hearing from everyone later.
Thank you very much, Lavina. That was very amazing overview of the current situation, actually, of technical developments across continents. So thank you very much for presenting it to our audience. And please, once again, reminding you, keeping your questions for our last 10 minutes Q&A session. And right now we are moving with Ben Watkinson. He's the CEO and director of Keymetrica. And the project he will discuss today is the MERON method for extremely rapid observation of nutritional status. That is the algorithm that detects malnutrition in children using facial recognition. So basically, that's one of the best uses of facial recognition systems I have ever heard personally. So Ben will tell us more. Please, Ben, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to share a presentation with you. I'm calling in from a rather snowy New York, and I hope that the internet connection holds up, but let's see. Hang on. So I'm just trying to, I'm not successful in sharing my screen. I'll just be one moment.
No worries, that's fine, I guess. 1 minute, we can wait.
I think I may be. Yep, that's not. So the screen share is not working. So I'll just go do a verbal. I'll just do a verbal version of the presentation with no screen sharing.
That's fine. I'm sure that will be still interesting.
So just to give some context and to link this into the Sustainable Development Goals. In 2017, nearly 51 million under 5 children were wasted, of whom 16 million were severely wasted, according to WHO. Malnutrition rates are key as sustainable development indicator. Now, timely data on severe malnutrition is most needed in the areas of the world where it's typically hardest to find, and especially in fluid conflict situations. So where we most want to know it, the data is often the weakest. There are 2 standard methods which are generally considered acceptable for measuring acute malnutrition or wasting. One is the weight for height, Z-score, and the other is a tape measure around the upper arm, which is called middle upper arm circumference, or MUAC. There's a real need for protocols and methods for rapidly collecting data to detect malnutrition, especially in conflict areas. We need methods that can minimize measurement areas, especially in contexts where there are few trained clinical staff, and therefore the traditional methods are quite complicated to use or difficult to use and generate a lot of errors. For example, MUAC, just wrapping a tape measure against a child's arm and registering the data creates a huge number of errors, typically, especially in unsupervised settings. We need methods that are deployable to remote areas with minimal equipment. They have to be verifiable. There's a huge tendency for political manipulation of data, especially in conflict situations, and malnutrition rates, data on malnutrition rates are typically very politically sensitive. And above all, we need methods that are child safe, that are non-invasive and pose the minimum risk to children, especially when you can't fully monitor what's going on. So how was Meron born? So my company, Chemetrica, works on food security monitoring. It looks like it's finally worked. Well,
I share the screen.
Okay, so that's great. Okay, so we can go down. Yeah.
Okay.
Up
like
one.
Here.
Up one.
Okay.
Yeah. So Chemetrica works on food security monitoring and early warning, often in conflict areas. And we had a real problem getting hold of reliable data, and we needed a method that was going to work in contexts where we didn't have very highly trained clinical staff. So I was on a call brainstorming with some colleagues about the possibility of taking photographs of children's upper arm and using AI to assess whether the child was malnourished. But I had concerns about removing the children's clothing. It's still an invasive method. Now, as I was having this conversation, I was in an Uber with my then 14-year-old daughter. And she was listening to my conversation, as 14-year-old daughters tend to, and said, well, you can tell somebody's weight just by looking at their face. Why don't you just take a facial snap? So the next day I spoke to one of my colleagues, and we started looking for data with photographs and body mass index to see whether it was indeed possible. So next slide. If we go to the next slide. So how long did it take? Well, we started looking for proof of concept, we started looking at adult body mass index and how far that could be detected from facial photography. And the first steps took about 6 months for a working proof of concept, a working model that essentially allowed you to upload a photo and return is that person overweight, obese, normal, underweight, severely malnourished. And then the next step was heavy. It took a year before we could start to get data together for training and applying the method to under 5 children. And once we got the funding, another 6 months to develop the servers, to rerun models, to develop the architecture for data capture and processing, especially for asynchronous data capture. And then the next and the final stage was to get a huge data set in order to train the model and ensure that it was accurate enough to be reliable. And that has taken so far forever. So one of the big challenges with AI is not the modeling per se, but it's access to data, and especially when the data has to be collected. It's really easy to get funding for the glamorous thing, which is, for the pure R&D for building the model. But it's not so easy to get funding for the more boring stuff, the hard work of collecting training sets so that you can improve the accuracy of the model. So next. Who was involved? So UNICEF provided an innovation grant for the tech stack development and for retraining the method using children. And UNICEF Kenya, we worked with, they have a really superb field teams, and we worked with their field teams to collect data in Kenya, which matched facial photography to weight and height data on children and other characteristics such as age and gender. And we also got a huge amount of support from Nancy Mock, who's a nutritional epidemiologist working at Tulane University, and has always been part of this conversation. And we had a bunch of people on our team from both from Kenya. We had a large Kenya team, and also a couple of analysts in the US. So on to the next one. So basically, just a quick summary of the process. Facial photography, a facial photo is snapped of the child. Then a small app tests whether it's okay. It's like a passport, one of those passport photo apps. Check whether the kid is looking straight into the camera, etc., etc. The data is then stored in an ODK form and asynchronously uploaded to a server. And then we run a model which processes the image, runs the learning model, and then classifies the image into moderate acute malnutrition, normal or severe malnutrition, and also returns a score. So basically a malnutrition score. Then the image features are saved, but itself is permanently deleted to protect the child. So that's basically how it works. To the next slide. So I won't go into a huge technical detail, but very willing if anybody wants to understand the technical details to go later. But it uses a fairly standard facial recognition technology to extract critical features of the face, and then to relate to it runs a neural network model to predict, to come up with the classification and the regression model to predict the malnutrition scores. We trained it on over 3,000 images, which were mainly skewed towards normal. So we didn't actually in the initial sample we didn't have enough extreme observations. We were really looking at how we can successfully predict extreme values, but there weren't enough extreme values in the training sample to successfully predict the extreme. So let's just go on. to the next. So it works basically because there's a relatively strong relationship between body fat and body weight, and between the fat on the face, especially in the cheek and chin area. And so what the deep learning model does is it picks up the relevant facial morphological features and uses those features to predict malnutrition. So it also predicts a weight for height Z score, but it's not so skillful at doing that for the reasons that I just mentioned. So I will jump over. This is the technical details of the extraction model. But anyway, the overall precision was.
Should I jump?
Sorry.
Should I turn to next slide?
Yeah, I'll just go very quickly. So basically, the prediction for moderate acute malnutrition is for the classification is relatively high. The precision is 0.78. However, for the it's good at predicting normal, but it's not so good at predicting extreme values, and especially it's not so good at predicting the severe acute malnutrition, because there weren't so many severe cases in the sample. And that's why to improve the model accuracy, we need a much bigger sample. So we can move on, I think. We can jump this one. So this is the regression model. You can see there's a high level of distribution. There's a lot of noise predicted, and the observed values here. So we can move on. So what were the successes? Well, in terms of predictive accuracy, the method is more successful in predicting weight for height than middle upper arm circumference in field conditions. So that is with all the errors that are associated with middle upper arm circumference measurement in field conditions. It's certainly less stressful and intrusive for children, and we tested how children and how mothers reacted to this new approach. It's a moderate improvement over MOAC then in detecting the moderate and severe acute malnutrition, and it's strongly preferred by mothers who to the conventional anthropometry, either weighing children in weighing bags or measuring the middle up, I guess because it's less invasive. So what were the challenge? Well, the challenges of, if anybody's ever tried to take the perfect photo of their kid, wriggling babies is a massive challenge for facial photography. And then the biggest challenge really is that for the tool to be accurate enough and for it to be reliable, it needs to be sampled it needs to be trained on a large sample, which includes extreme cases. And our sample, it took place just after there'd been some very successful nutrition interventions. So although it was in a high prevalence area, the actual malnutrition rates were low. So we weren't able to get the kind of accuracy that we were expecting. And our main challenge then has been to finance the additional data collection to get it to an accurate level. And as we were building the tool, there's a whole Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos saga was unraveling, and so we were very, very keen not to be coming out with a diagnostic tool that was based on a low evidence and likely to give misleading diagnostics. And so we're still waiting, essentially, and trying to find financing to complete that, to complete that work. So I can't remember whether there's another slide, possibly. I think it's. Okay, that's it. Thank you. And apologies for the snafu with the slides earlier, but thanks, Anna, for helping that.
Anna, you are muted.
The most spread word of these times, you are muted. So thank you very much, Ben, for your presentation. That was very amazing, this project and the idea. So I ask the audience to keep your questions for Ben and write down in the chat. We will keep it for the last 10 minutes. And right now we have the last storyteller for today's session. Storyteller last, but not the speaker. And this is Revas Barbakadze. He's assistant mayor to City Hall Rustavi municipality in Georgia country. And he will discuss chatbot for public services today. Please, Revas, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you for such an interesting event. And also I want to say thanks to previous storytellers. It was really interesting, not because of the new tools or new technologies what they are using, but as Josh says, all of us, we are trying to change behavior of citizens and people. Guys, you are really doing a great job. Now I want to tell you how we are trying to change something in our city. I will share the presentation right now. As Anna told, Rustavi is one of the biggest cities in Georgia with 140,000 citizens. And our city hall, of course, has numbers of several services for our citizens. And in Georgia and also in your countries, many business has their chatbots. In Georgia, many banks and insurance companies and online traders has this kind of tool, which is help them to make a communication with people. And once we ask to ourselves, why cannot City Hall have this kind of chatbot, which will be used for giving information for citizens about all the services what City Hall is giving to people. We asked about it to our mayor, what is he thinking about it, and he told that it's really good idea. Then we discussed this with UNDP Georgia, who was also interested, and they gave us some funding for creating this chatbot. And we started to work on it. It was really very hard work because, as I told, many businesses has this kind of bot. But I don't know, not only in Georgia, but also in post-Soviet area, if someone is using or created this kind of instrument. That's why this was one of the biggest challenge in our work, because we didn't know where to find experience for the experience to creating this kind of product. It takes approximately 6 months to make all this bot. The guys from City Hall was creating the tree of questions and answers, which was put in this bot, and organization Pulsar AI, they made the technical work. What is the C-bot? This is instant feedback. This is 100% accurate information minimum human resources. It's very flexible and easily accessible. This is how people can find this. It is integrated on Facebook Messenger, and everyone who is interested to and want to use this can find it very easily as by the searching. What can CBOT? What CBOT can? CBOT can give information about all services what Rustavi municipality is giving to citizens. It's about architectural services, supervision, municipal property issues, social programs, public information, and also military registration and commissariat in Georgia is also one of service of local government, and we also have this kind of answers on this bot. When I told that banks and other commercial organization has this kind of chatbots, they are more simple than our, because bank, of course, they have numbers of services, but not so much at a city hall. Finally, when we finished to make these trees of answers and questions and answers, it appears that approximately 1,000 question was included in our bot. You can see the first page of our bot. And this is the windows of questions and answers. It is only on Georgian because most population in Rustavi is Georgians, and everyone can speak on our nation language. There was idea to make some other language, for example, Russian or maybe Azerian for this bot, but it is really a huge work, and to make a new language for this bot, it means that to create a new program. That's why we made only Georgian chatbot. And I think that the biggest success was that when we started to work on this bot, the pandemic of COVID-19 soon starts, and this bot helps to many people and also to businessmen to get information about the services what they can get from local government. And you can see the screen photo of one international program. It's AU for Business, what is working in Georgia, sorry. And it is their blog, where they wrote about our blog as one of the good tools to support a business in COVID-19 pandemic situation. I think it is really a good success story for our product. And in the future, we are going to develop this product and also to make this kind of bot to other municipalities too. This is a logo of our bot, as you see. Thank you very much, and I am waiting the questions if you will have some.
Okay. Thank you very much, Revas, for your presentation. That was very interesting, definitely, to actually use the chatbots not only for corporate purposes, but also for the city halls and help develop sustainable cities. So now we are moving on the Q&A session. Actually, we have finished our storytelling session a little bit earlier than in agenda, so we can extend the time of Q&A session and more questions than we have right now. Just feel free to write down in the chat, and we will ask to our storytellers. Now, Ramon will start with questions. So what are the questions that we found in the chat?
Sure. Thank you, Anna Čubrice, and thank you all the speakers for storytelling your solutions with AI. It's really inspiring to see and really engaging and educational for most people, because I got a lot of questions. I also recorded them here next to my notes. And the first question is actually from Yuri Kamphuis. It's for Josh Jackson from 6 Clicks. So his question is, can you tell us more about the technical type of AI you're deploying?
Yeah, so we worked a lot with Deep Blue AI, if anyone's familiar with that, in their team, and then added technical people as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I think Yuri Kampai, your answer got it right now. The next question is also from Josh Jackson from Murat. How do we get additional information on modern slavery requirements?
And I'll add, because Yuri and I had a side conversation as well, so I'll add that to the mix here too. He asked a lot about blockchain technology as well, and sort of the integration. And I've worked on a few blockchain projects, and I will add as well, just so everyone knows, I am not a technical person. I'm very much on the legal and law and regulatory side. But with my legal policy piece, we've worked with people in the public safety sector, with people from Motorola, IBM, to put together some different protocols for governments within the US to implement some of the blockchain technology and the AI to track, how do you keep people safe, and so forth. So that's the follow-up. The next question about where to find certain things, one interesting aspect behind the technology that we have implemented is to ingest as much laws, regulations, and standards that we can within our platform. One thing that's near and dear to my heart is helping people that are not familiar with laws sort of digest it. And that is one aspect that we've really wanted to put into the system, is to make it easier for people to digest some of that legal aspect and understand. So in terms of modern slavery, there is the Modern Slavery Act from Australia, 2018, but also the State Department here has an entire page on sort of the governance around modern slavery. So there's a lot out there. I think if you want more specifics, then feel free to shoot me a message and I can send them over to you.
Perfect. Yeah, especially like you said, the emerging technologies combining blockchain and AI is a very interesting concept. And of course, the regulatory and policy-wise, the frameworks need to be set in partnership with, like you said, the governments, the businesses, and from a bottom-up perspective as well. Let's be honest about that. And the next question, actually, also for you, Josh Jackson, the last one, is how do you deal with the personal data problem? We talked about privacy, cybersecurity a lot, but how is the personal data being stored in your business as well, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of personal identity and looking at laws, I mean, we are up to date on all of our laws and cybersecurity, and following those rules and regulations. So from that aspect, we're cognizant of sort of the data pieces that people are concerned around. We don't sell data at all. And everyone that uses our technology it's their IP. It's their intellectual property that they would use and interact with. And I think that answers the question. If it doesn't, I'm happy to get a little more clarifying and answer it appropriately.
Sure. Yes, thank you for answering the question. Like Josh also said, if you'd like to get in touch with him, just send him a message. He can get in touch with you as well. So the next question is for John Castro from First Factory. The question is from Mirav Parek. Excuse me if I don't speak your name right. The question is, how does GMC engine deal with deepfakes? That's an interesting question, I think. We see a lot of fake images on the internet, and how do you deal with that aspect?
Well, regarding the deep fakes, the recognition of a real match in our site is in two steps. One is, well, the actual match when the software says, well, we have a match. And the second one is the verification from the law enforcement. So if there is a deep fake, I will say that the law enforcement agent is going to be able of check that. In the end, what we provide are just leads to the case managers so they can take action with those images. So, yeah.
Thank you, John, for answering that question. I think data also comes in mind with that as well, if you want to compare different images with each other. So thank you for answering. The next question is for Lavina Ramkison from AI.R. It's from Cobus. He said, great presentation, thanks. Have you considered making contact with Summary Roots at Silicon Cape regarding your work? So have you made contact with Summary Roots at... Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I will absolutely reach out to her. I have not chatted or made connection with Silicon Cape, but it is a good suggestion and I will definitely follow up. So thank you.
Thanks. Great. And there is another question for Lavina from Hatuna.
Sure,
so yeah, she's sharing that that's a very interesting observation on welcoming ecosystem and uptake by municipalities. So she's asking what made the ecosystem enabling and what motivated municipalities to engage.
Okay, that's a pretty interesting question. So I think, from an enabling perspective, it has been, they've been sitting with a lot of data and not sure what this data capability is. So that was the first sort of enabler. Understanding also what power that would then come with, that amount of data was something that they needed to understand. And I guess that interoperability of data and having a lot of external or international people coming on to say, we can do this and we can do that. They almost were in the position now to say, we need to take a pause and relook because it's our citizens' data, right? So I think that was one of the key drivers for them. From a motivational perspective, I guess it's been very much around an AI strategy for the continent as well as for the country. That's something that is an ongoing process, and we're trying to build an AI strategy, as well as the president has, initiated a 4IR initiative within the African continent, and that is also something, in aim for it. So I guess, in totality, it's been, we caught between policies and international learning curves, and how do we then best optimize what we have as one of the greatest motivations.
Thank you for answering that question with a brief explanation for it, Lavina. So the next question is for Benjamin Watkins from Keymetrica. The question is from Simon Dennis, and he says, you said that it uses traditional facial recognition feature extraction, and then it uses a structural data mining approach using neural nets and regression principally. Computer vision is moving away from this to deep neural learning. Is that on your roadmap? So in other words, are you using a feature of deep neural learning? So kind of like a technical question, but I'm curious about your.
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person to answer. I'm gonna plead the Josh defense on this one. So yes, I mean I think at this point the primary issue is not not so much the feature extraction. There's we've had there are major issues with dimensionality reduction. I think yes, open to any sort of upgrading of the specific algorithms used. We've been sort of informally experimenting with a bunch of different techniques and haven't managed to get any improvement in the results. And so I think at this point we just really need more data.
Thank you for answering that, Benjamin. Data is the essential point, of course, in having AI monitoring the right way. Another question is from Jori Kamphuis. What do you need besides funding and photos in order to improve the AI?
Well, so it's not just funding and photos. When, we haven't yet really so far discussed the issue of AI fairness, but we also need diversity. We trained the data set in one particular. We've trained a model on one particular data set in one particular country, which was Kenya. We don't know how it would work in other contexts, and we know that there is a risk when you then deploy AI technology that the inherent bias, either biases in how the technology is used or in the original training set, then lead to a broader problem of bias in the results that it gives. So I would think that the big additional problem is to be able to train it in multiple different geographies, and to ensure that any chance of there being any bias is rated.
Thank you very much, Ben. Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm sure the audience have even more questions about it. You feel free to reach out to him. He would be probably open to answer your questions. And we have another question for Rebas about the chatbot, city chatbot. And so the question from Tyler asking, have you experienced any reluctance from users regarding using a chatbot because of fear of safety? Yes. Probably that's about privacy.
Yes, thank you for this question. Yes, when we were creating the chatbot and when first time we launched it, there was several questions about how it is secure about personal data for citizens. But as I told, this chatbot is integrated in Facebook Messenger. It means that everyone who already has a registration on Facebook, they don't need some additional registration for use it. They can, everyone who is on Facebook, they can just search the cBot and starting using it. That's why they don't need to add there some additional data or some additional personal information about them. So I can say that it is safe. As Facebook is safe. That's why there was not any problem for citizens to use it, and no one was against to use it because of the safe issues.
Thank you very much. That's actually correct. And we have another question that doesn't address specifically to anyone, but that's more of a general question. So if anyone wants to express their opinion, please feel free to do so. So this is a question from Dr. Hector Torres. How do we bring these to college and university students, introduce, for example, some of these AI ideas into our curriculum? So first of all, my answer would be that one of the ideas of launching this event was that actually to bring the idea and spreading the word about SDGs to as more people as possible. And the target audience has been universities, the companies, developers, and so on, to actually help and encourage people to think about some of the specific problems that could be possibly addressed by AI. So yeah, exactly. If anyone has any input about this question, feel free.
I can, if someone else wants to, I have some input.
Great.
All right, I'll go. So I've experienced this before a couple times with teaching. So my first thought would be, I had particular students from a legal and regulatory of business class ask for more understanding around AI and business. And so they approached the dean, or they approached different higher level groups beyond teachers to say, hey, we want this, we need this. One added benefit, I think, for the students asking for it was being able to show the data that most businesses, about 74% of those in the US, want to hire people with a little bit of understanding of artificial intelligence or machine learning or some sort of technology. So I think the dual throng approach of saying, hey, our students want it, plus employers are demanding it, is helpful. One challenge that I came in contact with was, how long does it take to go through the accreditation process, which is super challenging. And there's no real answer to it yet, except for creating, some classes are labeled like skills course. So at Johns Hopkins, they have these skills courses, and you don't have to really change that much to the curriculum. You just kind of change the topic and move on from there. The second would be from a more graduate level, then it's easier to kind of get through the curriculum. So that's my personal experience behind it.
Okay, thank you very much, Josh. And actually, we will continue this kind of discussion and how to encourage more this dialogue in the next session, in a panel discussion. So just make sure to join that one after the break as well. And now we will have last question, Ramon, please, because we're going to the end date of the storytelling session, including the Q&A, and then we're going to have a short break.
Sure.
After which
so sorry for me jumping out. I had disconnected for a little while. So the last question would be from the audience's side for Benjamin Watkins. What do you need besides, oh yeah, that's also what I already questioned. Sorry. So I think my question would be pretty relevant as well, because I'm a lobbyist at the Parliament in Brussels. And I would like to have the aspect of how can lawyers be more engaged in the AI topic? What approaches should lawyers and policymakers take to be educated on this topic of AI, and where should they start to be educated on the topic of AI? And this is like an open question, so maybe someone of you could jump in with some answers on that, and I would be highly appreciated for it. Thank you. So, someone has a answer?
Yeah, I think, Rezo, I think it would be interesting to hear from you, because you're the city mayor and probably have the experience with some bureaucrats or people who are engaged in policy making in Parliament.
I can give some U.S. perspective. I think one aspect would be there's this notion of unexplainability, right? And my father is a mathematician. He's I'll use him as an example because I did not follow his same path, but him being a rocket scientist, I think gives a little credibility to the mathematics. And his whole thing is, if there's no math, then there's no code, right? And so it might not be completely or easily understood, but there's still explainability behind it. And from a lawyer's perspective, there is a lot that we just don't understand, right? Lawyers just, if they don't understand it, then they argue that it's unexplainable. And so I think putting it in language that is simple and not, multivariable calculus, then that helps change the conversation. And I think, as Rezo and I were saying, is that you kind of start changing someone's behavior, then you can change the culture and understanding that.
Thank you, Josh, for answering that question. Keep it simple and stupid sometimes. That's a quote that I came up with. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And I think we have about 5 minutes more, and I honestly have a question that was actually asked to me via the social media, because I was actively talking about SDGs, and then I honestly didn't have a very specific answer, or I think I didn't have the best answer. So probably I can get some answer from you because you have this experience. So there was the group of developers, machine learning developers, who wanted to solve one of the problems that they could solve technically as a group. So they wanted to find some of the problem that they could solve with their algorithm. And one of my answers was and would be like pointing out to SDGs to check out the United Nations website, and like what do you see on my background, like these 17 SDGs, and this has already under that like 169 targets. So like the chunks of these goals to be addressed. So like kind of to check those targets and probably try to address one of these goals. So I know you already addressed in your presentations, but once again, to specifically focus on the question, how actually did you start working on the idea? How did you find the problem? Or was it that first you saw the problem and then you wanted to kind of address with your technical solution? Or was it like that you wanted to just solve some of the problems and then you started looking for the problem? Like which one was the first one in your case? So I want to hear the answer from all the storytellers actually.
Well, I can start. We definitely started with a problem that we wanted to solve, which was a known deficiency of existing ways of doing something. And so we started with a problem, and it turned out that AI was the solution. But I guess it didn't have to be. But at least it meant that that what we did with the AI was not. It was very bounded, and so we were definitely asking a very, very specific set of questions with the AI. But that's because we started with. I mean, when you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, you've got these big indicators, right? And those indicators are collected through conventional statistical surveys. And those surveys are patchy, infrequent, they're at very high levels typically sampled at very high levels of aggregation. And so our question started with the fundamental weaknesses in the measurement systems behind the Sustainable Development Goals.
Oh, cool. I see. Great. That's very interesting. So first there was the problem. What are the answers of other storytellers? We go on the circle and then we finish.
Okay, if I can go next. For me, it's been very much not a problem, but understanding the continent and understanding, the issues at hand. And, we're already sitting on a back foot in terms of, access to water, access to sanitation, access to the internet. It's triple-fold and triple compounded. No matter where you look. And for us, or for me in particular, it was very much more focused around how can we take this large entity and try and solve it or solve issues with the greatest impact. And when we came across the UN sustainability goals, somehow or the other, it just managed to slot in a lot more of what we were trying to do in a very segmented way. It just brought it together. That was the one area. And, the other end for us was also understanding the technology in its full capacity and what it was able to do, right? Because there's so many things and technology keeps changing all the time. And, how do you keep up with it? But it was understanding that together with the best applied AI use cases that exist, and then trying to bridge those worlds together, and then identifying what those opportunities were within our country. So we kind of did quite a whole different approach. But it was definitely an interesting one, and I think we learned a lot, so that hopefully we could avoid making some of the initial mistakes up front, and also being able to engage the necessary key stakeholders within the ecosystem on a more empowered or educated level, from all of these research and all of these different avenues that we went down first. So that's quite a long-winded sort of approach, but it's been successful thus far.
Thanks, Laurina. And shortly, others. Who jumps next? If you're still here.
Real quick, are you just asking where did we start? Is that?
Yeah, exactly. So was it first you had a problem, then you wanted to solve it with AI, or you just had some technology in front of you and then you just wanted to identify problem and then start solving? So was there first a problem or the first the technology and then you started to search for the problem to solve?
Yeah, so it was definitely it was the problem, right? And I want to interject too that I think that using AI is not always the right solution, right? So having a problem and then identifying whether or not it's best to use AI, or do you use some other process? So that is how I've definitely approached everything, is to say, if we understand that, if we have a problem, do we want to use AI based on our understanding, and if it's the appropriate tool to be used, because it's not always the appropriate tool to use.
Okay, clear. Thanks.
May I now?
Yeah.
We just wanted to make a life of our citizen more easy. This was our main inspiration, and also it was really very interesting how we can use the AI in service development and in service delivery. And also, this is a very good tool to decrease the number of people who are coming in City Hall every day. It is good for that people because they don't need to come in our building for every questions. And also, it is very good for our to the people who are working in City Hall. They don't need to answer to many people, and it is very actual now in COVID situation. That is one. That is also why our CBOT is very important tool. In today lockdown. Today, it's a lockdown in Georgia, and people cannot move free. And to using this chatbot makes their life really easy.
Great, thanks. And if John wants to add something, and we move on with break.
Yeah. We have this problem. I would say that from the beginning of the humanity. On the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children starts 2 decades ago, 20 years ago, and the problem was totally different. We didn't have smartphones. We didn't have GPS, digital cameras, not even Wi-Fi. So once we have this problem and knowing that we have this technology for use, I would say that this decision to start working on GMC engine was pretty well. It's pretty important for the humanity. So yeah, I think that technology is being used for a purpose now. I'm pretty happy to be here helping to that cause.
Great, thanks a lot. So we're exactly on time for break. Now we will have 10 minutes break if you want to have some snacks or water or anything, and we are definitely waiting for you in our panel discussion, like after 10 minutes that we are starting. Please join in and again ask the questions to our panel discussions that will be mainly focused on the future potentials of artificial intelligence for sustainable development goals. See you in 10 minutes. Okay, let's slowly jump in. So we are recording this session, and we wanted to make sure with the speakers, panel discussion participants, that they agree on recording. We will distribute the recordings on a demand basis. It will not be uploaded on anywhere. So if any of the panel discussion participant has something against the recording, please let us know and we'll stop it. Okay.
Perfect. So then I think we should start. Yes?
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome. If you haven't just joined yet or just joined now, we are ready and lined up to talk about their experience with AI and Sustainable Development Goals combined. And let me allow the introduction of the speakers. I would like to ask the speakers if they could wave if I mention their name, so we all know who we mean and we talk to. So first of all, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Elina Vitanimi. Can you wave to the camera as well? Perfect. Okay, so Elina Vitanimi works with UNAIDS in Geneva as an innovation advisor. She is a co-founder of the Health Innovation Exchange, which connects countries, innovations and investments to create improved health outcomes through innovative solutions. Elina has been with UNAIDS for almost 10 years, working previously in a variety of areas such as HIV treatment, country development support, resource mobilization, donor relations and partnerships. Before joining United Nations AIDS, she worked in Finland, UK, Senegal and China with NGOs, academia and the private sector, including in education and intellectual property rights management. Elina believes in the power of partnerships by joining forces across the public and private sectors, as well as in driving change through fearless innovation and creativity. Welcome, Mrs. Vitanimi. Thank you for joining us. The second speaker, second panelist is Sasha Lucioni. Yes, thank you for waving. Sasha Lucioni is a researcher working with Joshua Benjo and others on climate change relative initiatives at Mila, which is her company, including projects that aim to estimate the environmental impact of machine learning and to analyze financial disclosures from climate standpoint. Her work sits at the intersection of AI and environment, and her goal is to find ways to maximize the positive impacts of AI while minimizing the negative ones, be it from a research or application perspective. Her work has been featured in news and media outlets such as MIT Technology Review, Wired, and the Wall Street Journal. She's also a 2020 National Geographic Explorer and holds an Ivaro postdoctoral fellowship. Welcome to the panel, Sasha. And the gentleman of this panel discussion, we have David Jensen. David is the coordinator for the Digital Transformation Task Force. Thank you for waving. At the United Nations Environmental Programme, UNEP. In this capacity, he is responsible for developing a new digital transformation strategy and for accelerating the uptake of digital technologies across organization. David has been advising the United Nations Science Policy Business Forum on these topics since 2018 and was the co-author of a flagship discussion paper entitled The Case for a Digital Ecosystem for the Environment. Within the digital space, David has co-founded numerous platforms, including MapX, Earth School, the United Nations Biodiversity Lab, and the Environmental Peacebuilding Platform. Welcome, David Jensen. Thank you for joining. Our fourth speaker is Richard Foster Fletcher. Richard is an artificial intelligence advisor and speaker. He is the founder of Neuropath.ai, a human-centric AI advisory practice, chair of MKAI, and host of the Boundless podcast. A graduate of the MIT AI Strategy course and a widely published author on the future of AI. Richard speaks about AI innovation, ethics, and the future of work for leading institutions, including Henley Business School, UCL, LSE, and Cranfield University. Richard has collaborated with the United Nations Environmental Programme to support their AI and digital transformation journey via his podcast. And I can really recommend listening to a podcast, the Boundless podcast. So thank you for joining, Richard. And our last speaker, Alberto Medina, is the innovation expert for international development at United Nations Industrial Development Organization. He is a graduate from University of Vienna, Master of Arts in International Global Studies. Alberto has a bachelor degree in International Relations from the National Autonomous University of Mexico and is currently the program coordinator from R.A, United Nations Regional Academy from the United Nations to train young and emerging young generations of scholars in issues of importance to the United Nations. So these are our five speakers of today, and I'm really grateful to having them on board. I think we're going to have a very interesting dialogue about AI and AI technologies. So Anna, would you like to jump in your general overview?
Yeah, thank you very much for introducing all the speakers, and thank you speakers, all the panelists to be here today. I'm sure that will be a very interesting discussion today. So I just wanted to introduce a couple of other things about sustainable development goals. I just mentioned a couple of them, but we'll explain further. So the targets that are under 17 sustainable development goals, that are 169 targets, and the last research from different institutions showed the reveal that 134 target can be actually influenced by artificial intelligence in a very efficient way, while there might be some chances for 59 targets to be inhibited in this or that way. So the research is very few in this realm, and there is a huge gap. So it has just started. We have just started to work on the research and also the practice on how to work on sustainable development goals with artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies. And also for our panel, just like sustainable development goals itself is divided into three panels. We will discuss into three pillars. We will discuss this. We will take the discussion into these directions. So that is society, economy, and environment. So I'm looking forward to our discussion, and let's jump in with the first question.
Yes, perfect.
And here.
Thank you, Anna, for the introduction of the panel discussion, for a brief general overview. So currently we are in a global pandemic crisis, and the first question is about the finance gap of $2.5 trillion regarding the Sustainable Development Goals. Of course, there's also opportunities in regards to raising awareness about the SDGs, efficient policy making to transform digitally, long-term investment by corporations, and of course, more innovations. And my question for the panel is, what are the most urgent problems from the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that need to be solved, and if AI can solve them? So I would really love to get the panel on that question. And maybe the first question could be starting from Elina Vitanini, and then we can of course, open to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Ramon and Anna, and hello to everyone. It's a real pleasure to be part of this conversation tonight. Maybe before I even get started, I just want to start with a disclaimer. I'm seeing so many people in the room who are truly experts on AI and really understand AI through and through technically. And I just want to say that I am not at all an AI expert. I really look at my approach to this work is from a perspective of really global policy and connecting and building partnerships and working through the UN towards the SDGs, with AI and digital technologies being kind of one of those tools in the mix. So if I say something completely silly about AI as a technology, please do forgive me. But with that being said, to your question, Ramon, I think I worked with UNAIDS, and UNAIDS is the UN program on HIV, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Health Innovation Exchange. And so our primary focus is health. And what we do is we work with countries and we kind of analyze the needs of countries and look at what are the burning needs around healthcare and what are the potential opportunities where innovations and new technologies could bring solutions that help countries kind of gear towards reaching the SDG 3 goals. And SDG 3 is the health SDG in this mix. So I wouldn't be able to sort of isolate AI as a specific thing. I don't think that there's a direct answer to your question in, can AI solve these issues? I think we need to take a few steps back and see, what can it be maybe a component? Can it be one of the tools in the mix that can help us get to better health and better well-being for people? And in that mix, I think it does have a role to play. And it's been interesting now with the COVID crisis. Of course, health is in the forefront more than it really ever has been. So at the same time, while it's an enormous challenge, I think it's also an opportunity for us working on health to really raise the awareness of the potential of technologies such as AI and digital health and what kind of solutions it can bring. I mean, we are really seeing that when we have AI-powered and other types of digital health, how it can really transform like frontline health workers, for example. A mobile phone in their hand can become an incredible tool. We've seen through the work that we do in sourcing innovations and connecting them to countries, and how some of them have really pivoted in the past few months very quickly to provide solutions that are AI-based solutions to countries. Just for example, in diagnostics, we're working with some innovators who are working on COVID detection from cough and from sound. So you can cough either directly to a microphone, or you can even over the phone line, you can cough and, that can be analyzed, or otherwise image-based diagnostics from x-rays on COVID and other lung-based illnesses. So these are technologies that have an enormous potential to have an impact on health, but they will not do it alone. I mean, this is where we really need to see what do we need to provide as the global community to get it there, to make sure that it has an impact. And it's not enough to have the best technology in the world. You have to have partnerships that will enable those technologies to be scaled. And you need to have governments who are open to taking on those technologies. And we are noticing that more and more there is a lot of openness, especially with the urgency of today, for governments to take those technologies on board. But there are a lot of issues around it. We have to talk about the governance, who manages the data. I know we'll come probably to this later, and there's a lot more to be said about the privacy and the data and the rights issues around this. We need to look at finance, carry that whole ground. And sometimes we have to, for example, when we talk about creating impact on health to digital health and AI, sometimes we have to take quite a few steps back and looking at issues that will get us there, and countries race. For example, with us often energy access is as one of the issues. And this is where we really come to a cross-sectoral work, and we have to look at the SDGs as a whole. And us working on SDG 3, we cannot ignore the rest of it, because to get that wonderful AI solution to work for that frontline health worker to help to diagnose someone with COVID, we have had to ensure that we probably have solar powers in place so that they could charge their mobile phone and they could have access to energy. Similarly, we have to look at connectivity. We have to have the satellites in the sky that provide us the right connectivity to allow the data then to be transferred. So it really is truly, it needs to be a partnership across the private sector, government, and the communities, who really need to be also at the center of it. So we always look at it from people first, looking at who are we designing these solutions to? I will try to stop there because I know that there's a lot more people who want to pitch in and a lot more to be said. But that's my quick answer to your question. So yes, no.
Thank you for answering that question, Elina. I think the partnership and especially SDG 17 comes into place very handy if you want to partner up with other organizations as well. Sasha, what is your approach on this question? I'm curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, I think I have a bit of a complementary profile to Alina's. So I do come from more of a research background in artificial intelligence. And as such, I think that it's important to see AI as a tool, as a transversal tool. And so I don't like telling people, focus on this, or because that's a very almost personal decision, because it depends on where you're at. And that's actually the kind of the crux of the issue for me, is depending on your environment, depending on your organization, depending even sometimes on your geographical location, AI can be a kind of a Swiss knife in many cases. And so I think that if people do want to get involved in AI and at the service of the SDGs, it's important to for them to look out inside at what interests them and to look around them to see what can be useful in their environment. And so for me, for example, that was obviously the environment and actually education as well. I worked on it a lot, but I think that there's so many different ways to approach this question, that establishing partnerships and looking as well at the work that has already been done, because AI is kind of such a buzzword right now, but people have been working on these technologies for decades. There's so much work being done that doesn't necessarily have the AI stamp of approval or the AI kind of hashtag on it. But I think it's really important to look at what people have been doing with more traditional approaches and ask the question of how can AI help, instead of seeing as an AI first thing, seeing it as an AI supporting approach. So this is kind of my more global answer to the question.
Yes, it definitely is a buzzword, like you mentioned, Sasha. Anyone else want to jump in on the question asked? Feel free to answer. David, yes.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for the invitation to be here. I kind of wanted to make 3 points. The first is just an observation that the term AI and even the term digital transformation is not really found across the SDGs, indicating that when they were negotiated, a lot of these technologies were not yet fully mainstreamed. And so I think there has been a big shift since they were adopted compared to now. And so I think there are a lot of opportunities to deploy these tools across the SDGs, which were not really thought about when they were negotiated. So that's point one. The second point is that if you look at the environmental indicators in the SDG framework, there are about 93 different indicators. And if you ask the question, well, how many of those can we actually measure at the global scale? It's only about 32%. I think 68% cannot yet be measured at the global scale. And that's exactly where we need to be looking at, okay, well, what can AI do for us to help at that global measurement? How can we begin to take satellite data and sensor data and basically make sense of it to plug those gaps? So I think that's really important work, is to look at those 68% and ask the hard question about what can AI do? And I think the third point from my side, in terms of where UNEP and the UN Environment Program sits, like what are our priorities? I would say there are four core priorities. The first is, as I said, plugging those SDG gaps. The second is really looking at this whole question of environment and social governance in terms of the financial sector, and really focusing on that E, right? The environmental side of the ESG equation, and asking what can AI bring in terms of assessing environmental risks and helping companies really understand the environment and carbon footprint of their entire operation. So that's number two. The third one I would really say is looking at supply chains, the supply chains of different products. And again, taking all of the data from supply chain or from value chains to supply chains, and again, making sense of it, trying to really understand what the environment and carbon footprint of a particular product and the supply chain of that product is. And then the final priority I would say is, once we have that data, how do we begin to use AI to start influencing consumer behaviors and consumer decision-making and help consumers take better decisions and more sustainable decisions in terms of comparing the footprints of different products, and maybe even filtering products and or being exposed to digital nudging. So those are some of the areas that I would put on the table as our priorities. Thanks.
Thanks, David. I think you're absolutely right. If it can't be measured, it can be like innovated in as well. So we have to combine that data and see how far we can go with that. Richard Foster, would you like to jump in on that?
Sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and be in such an esteemed panel. Obviously, we're talking about number 13, climate action, a lot here, but I don't think you can separate that from the SDG number 10, which is about equality. And we can all get really excited by the work that goes on at, say, OpenAI, right, or DeepMind or SenseTime in China, and think, wow, they're going to do something that's going to save us, you know. And I don't think it's in there. I think there's some great stuff, but actually, you know, why have we got this world now where everything's accelerated, where you imagine it and somebody's building it? Well, many reasons, but one is more connected minds. More and more people around the world are getting online and contributing ideas, but we still have this huge gulf. 600 million homes in Africa without power. So actually about the accessibility to machine learning, not with some crazy idea that we've never heard of, not just about protein folding like we're seeing at DeepMind, but about getting it into the hands of all of these new people. Everybody around the world, every single country has got to balance and optimize their grid now, with EVs, with electricity, with linking it to our schedules and our plans and our offices so that we can have a balanced grid. Every single country's got to do that. And that's about accessibility and about equality and access.
Thank you so much for that answer, Richard. Really, like you said, accessibility is really important in that regard as well. Alberto Medina, would you like to answer your part as well?
Thank you very much, Ramon, and thank you very much, first of all, for the organizers for allowing me to be here. I would like just to support some of the points that have already been said, more specifically by Elena, who was commenting on to sort of inviting to embrace a more holistic approach to the SDGs, because as Richard was mentioning also, they are intertwined in nature. So you cannot, even if you try to tackle one specific SDG, is definitely one sequence or one collateral impact, if you can call it so, on another SDGs. So in this sense, I also concur with David, who was mentioning that AI could also help us to not only accelerate the progress of the SDGs, but also to measure the impact of the SDGs. It's very interesting what David was mentioning about. It's true, in the SDGs, when they were embraced and negotiated in 2015, they were not really, the digital transformation is not something it really stands up from the document. But what is really interesting, ever since the United Nations has taken huge steps in trying to leverage from innovation in many different ways. I would like to touch upon some other topic that Richard was raising about this inequality of distribution of the access of for AI, but maybe we could touch upon this a little bit later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alberto, for your brief answer as well. Anna, do you have any question as well for our panelists?
Yeah, Alberto actually exactly touched that point, and I'll just continue the question to that so as we expand the discussion. Thank you very much for your insights, first of all. So, my question goes on exactly, there's a lot of discussion who actually can benefit artificial intelligence and this concern. So we even have now the term decolonial AI, and we have a lot of discussions whether there will be some countries who will be less, who will benefit less, and some countries and personalities and groups and communities who will benefit more than the others. So what do you think, if there really is such a risk, and what kind of risk is that specifically, and how we can address to that question? So as we can go on the circle and give short insights towards this direction. Please, like any of you could start.
Let me jump in then quickly. I'll be brief, but I just want to kind of make an observation that around health. So the COVID crisis really has, in a way, it has really highlighted some of the existing inequalities. We've seen that though the kind of parts of society and communities that are most marginalized are even more so in this current crisis. A lot has been affected. Supply chains have been affected. Livelihoods and healthcare systems have been heavily affected. And in that, we've seen that AI and digital health and this kind of approaches have actually kind of shown a lot of promise to help bridge that gap in some ways. These technologies can be part of the answer of how do we reach and enable some of those communities. I'm not saying it's a whole answer in any way, and it's not some magic pill, but there's a lot of promise, but we haven't quite seen that promise being fulfilled yet. But I think there's a lot of work for us to do as international community to really come together and support the framework building around that we have the right policies and the right governance and right partnerships in place to make that happen. Because we do risk exactly what you were saying. And I mean, we risk coming to a situation where it's very unequally, the benefits are very unequal to different populations. So I see that, it's part of the problem, but it can also be part of the solution. So I think we need to push it more towards the solution side of this equation.
I agree with Lena, but just to build upon that, I think that a lot of AI approaches are still seen as colonialist because they come from places of privilege and aim to benefit places of maybe less privilege. And so there's been really interesting work about this, so decolonializing AI. So Shakir Mohammed has a really interesting article, and co-authors, but they talk about the fact that we need to turn the tables and make it inclusive AI. So not just, someone in Silicon Valley comes up with an algorithm that they deploy in a country that has less money and less technical capacity. It's really, for example, people from Silicon Valley with people from the country where they'll deploy that build together a tool that corresponds to the needs of both. And I think it's really important because AI has, there's a lot of money in AI, there's a lot of promise in AI for sure, but it is very clustered around specific places, notably in the global north. So I think that it's really, really important to start, declustering and making more distributed groups and putting more people around the table that have different points of view, and to have, because essentially algorithms reflect us as the creators of algorithms and the data that we train them on. And so until we put people around the table that have essentially can participate in the creation of these algorithms and the deployment, then we'll keep seeing it as kind of this one-way street of giving technology. But it's a two-way street. It should be kind of in both directions. And I think that inclusive AI development is really, really important, and it should be done a lot more than it is.
Can I jump in, Anna?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I loved what Sasha said. I would just like to again echo in this particular, in the world that we work in terms of natural resources and natural resource concession contracts, I think there is a massive risk when you start having these huge information asymmetries between kind of companies who have a huge amount of data and predictive analytics, governments that have some, and then communities that have very, very little. You really do have this massive information asymmetry, and that can be then used against them for negotiating better terms on concession contracts and things like that. And I think that's where you have a massive risk. And as Sasha said, there are multiple ways to sort of mitigate that risk. I think the other key thing is making sure that the public sector that invests in AI algorithms publishes those algorithms and makes it as open and accessible as possible. And I think we need to be looking at this whole concept of digital public goods. And what does that mean? And how do governments actually support and invest in digital public goods? And what are the conditions around those digital public goods that private sector needs to respect? Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I may jump in. I cannot agree more with what has been said already. I think one of the major, I really enjoyed the first part of the conversation when we heard the speakers and trying to explore what is the potential of AI for supporting, many different aspects on that could impact directly on the SDGs. The question is, and it's really appreciated that you raised this issue, and there's a potential risk of exacerbating the existing inequalities among the places where the technology is going to be deployed. It's very interesting what Sasha is mentioning about this aspect of colonialism attached to AI. I would say that there's nothing against using technologies that were developed elsewhere. The problem is if the recipients don't have the capacity to modify or just have the capacity to use the technology, as mere users, it really raises the risk that these potential users will remain as such. There's one very. I wrote an article about this. About this potential risk, and considering the concentrated nature of the global economy. And the idea is that developing countries also adopted technologies, but at the same time, proportional efforts are made towards producing or enabling the recipients of the technology to also not only use but also adapt the technologies that they are receiving. So, with this, I will stop my intervention here. Thank you.
I'm happy to jump in if that's okay.
Sure.
Yes.
Go ahead, Richard.
This is a reminder, isn't it, of the power of words, the power of language, because it was Vladimir Putin, wasn't it, who said whoever rules AI is going to rule the world. Ironically, Russia also has a massive drain on talent, so it probably isn't going to be Russia unless they change their policies. So China, they had 30,000 patents, didn't they, registered last year, 2019, 52% up on the year before. So Putin might have said it, but certainly China got the memo. And we all know the stories about the US and big tech and the power of Facebook, more powerful potentially than Europe. So yeah, it's worrying. And it's even more worrying when we look at what's happening with the vaccine. We were told that we'd get a solidarity across the world. We're not. 9 out of 10 people in poorer countries, they're waiting 18 to 24 months before they get the vaccine. Rich companies are buying it, everything they can. So that's the problem. In terms of the opportunity, we saw Facebook and Microsoft and Google really working so hard last decade to become platforms. We see Salesforce doing the same thing now, $27.7 billion to buy Slack. One reason only, because you can't be a mega corporation with an app. You have to have a platform. And that's our opportunity. In Europe, we don't have a big tech, a big AI player who's lobbying against us. We don't. So we have the opportunity to build out a practice of disclosure for data use, just like GDPR. Right? So why does this matter? Because if you can have this practice of disclosure for data use, then you create more fairness. Just like when chemical companies could throw their excess chemicals in the rivers, they can't do that anymore. Yes, it means profitability comes down. It means fairness comes up. And that's the opportunity to see more companies, more regions, great places like Africa, India, huge hunger to work in data science in India, to get more involved, because the big players won't be able to monopolize quite so much. And that's what we've got to lead on in Europe, in my opinion.
Thank you, Richard, for your brief answer. I think the word involvement is really important in that regard. And the second question will be more around that topic. So let's jump from the AI to the SDG topic, specifically SDG 17 about partnerships. Because you all worked in variety field of AI and working on projects, can you name some examples on partnerships between governments, businesses, and initiatives and organizations that in your way were really new and really disruptive in that sense? Could you touch on that topic as well? Elina, can you start off with some examples that you can give us, the audience as well? Thank you.
Well, I mean, maybe I'll just briefly refer to what we've built with UNAIDS and other partners, and that's the Health Innovation Exchange platform, which really came from this us kind of starting to talk to ministers of health and other ministers around the world and understanding, what are they struggling with in terms of using innovations to support their healthcare services. And they a lot of them flagged the similar issues in saying that they don't have this kind of trusted facilitation or neutral facilitation. There's a lot of this, what Richard was also mentioning, a lot of companies and tech providers, they go and lobby and they try to sell their products, of course, but governments are often lacking in this kind of neutral facilitation or understanding, someone to do the translation between the different worlds. And I think that's really key. And we heard similar things kind of from the other side of the coin then, from innovators in the business world and people who are developing tech, be it from startup or from academy or from different sectors. So we heard that they often don't have a very good understanding of what exactly is the context in various different countries, or what are the needs of specific communities that would allow them to then adjust their technologies for those contexts and find right partners on the ground. Exactly what Sasha was saying, who do you start to develop these technologies with, and how do you find those kind of people that you need to involve in your processes when you start to develop your products further. So we came up with this platform, which is, you were talking about platforms, Richard, so I'm talking about my platform now. But the idea is really to have a place where we can bring and facilitate and translate from these different worlds to come together. And I guess the third part of the puzzle that we bring to the table really is the money part, because nothing happens without money. And we are in the UN, we've been working for years and years under this model of donor funding to time-limited projects. And when we talk about innovations and technologies, it often translates into pilot projects here and there that they come and go, and they don't really leave any kind of sustainable imprint that would take us towards our targets. So we wanted to see how do we use the existing donor money and ODA money that there is, but then really build a bridge to the private money that there is. If we look at how much there is in ODA, I mean, we're talking about, hundreds of billions and not that much per year, but we're talking in the trillions when we're talking about how much there is in private equity market, for example. How do you actually connect these two? So what we're trying to do on a day-to-day basis is really to be the translators and make these people come together to form partnerships in a way that it makes sense, and you can take these technologies that gets translated to countries. And I think something that we really have realized that a lot of these different actors, they do speak different languages, and it has been a learning curve also for us to kind of, from our UN position, to try to understand, what is a brain or thinking process of a private equity investor look like compared to a startup or an academic innovator, and then what is the Minister of Health, what is making them tick, and what are they trying to do, what is their political agenda. So a lot of our time is spent in trying to analyze this and then kind of facilitate in the middle so that we can actually build projects that then end up scaling the right technologies in the right places with the right people and for the right people.
Thank you, Elina. Sasha, would you like to answer that as well?
Yeah, it's interesting what Elina said. I've actually been aspiring to be kind of that translator between technical AI language and, I guess, more normal terminology. And I find that I actually have a bachelor's in linguistics, and I've always been so sure that language is kind of the key to everything, and that a lot of problems that people have, a lot of issues that exist in our world are just miscommunications. And I think that one of the impediments to AI is because the people who do AI are surrounded by other people who do AI, and to talk in a way that, even recently I was at the NeurIPS conference, virtually, and then I was reading through the titles, and then even, if someone wanted to just read the titles, they wouldn't be able to understand the titles of I think around 75% of the papers that came out. And I was wondering, why isn't there some more work being done, as vulgarizing or communicating? So I really think that that's important. Just if we had someone dedicated to going to these conferences and then publishing blog posts or something. It would be really helpful. But more specifically with regards to projects, some of the projects that I'm working on, for example, we're working with the Montreal Insectarium on a biodiversity tracking app that uses AI. And it's really interesting because I'm learning so much about insects that I had absolutely no clue about anything. And they're learning about AI. And in our meetings, like we have bi-monthly meetings where we kind of update each other on the progress, and from their end, from our end. And I think that we all come out of those meetings feeling like we really learned something and that we're really making progress. And compared to other meetings where we just kind of talk about neural network architectures, I feel like this is a lot more rewarding. And at the end of the day, I believe that it's going to be much more impactful than just kind of like talking about some more algorithms we're implementing. So I agree that it's really important, but it is really hard. And at the beginning, you really have to, control yourself before you say something. Like you have to kind of have a filter of, should I use this word? Should I explain this acronym? Should I describe it in more detail and things like that? But then once you get the ball rolling and people have trust, I think trust is really crucial. So, what do you mean when you say that? And like sometimes even I have to say, okay, you kind of glossed around like why these two species can be confused by an AI algorithm. Those are just two Latin names that I didn't understand. Can you explain them to me? And so we have this now. We have a rapport that took a while to build. So I think that's really crucial in these contexts.
Thank you, Sasha. David, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, you asked for some examples, and I have to say, Google Earth Engine and Google in general has been really instrumental in offering the UN access to their cloud platform, and in particular, allowing us to look at sort of global scale change, right? Taking the 30 years of satellite data and making sense of it. And had we done that without Google Earth Engine, it would have taken us about 600 years to crunch the data. And with Google Earth Engine, they were able to bring that down to about 45 days. And we can now look at global level changes like deforestation. We can look at fishing vessels, and we can look at the distribution of water and various variables like that. So Google has been really fantastic in enabling that kind of global level analysis. And that's really important for the SDGs. And one of the partnerships we have with Google is exactly on. It's SDG 6.6.1, which is global surface water extent. And they're really helping us monitor that on a global basis. But this raises some really important questions about sort of what's the underlying business model of these public-private partnerships. And should we be adopting at the global level principles, standards, and safeguards that really guide these partnerships? And I think we should. I think it's fantastic that we're working together with the private sector, but I feel that these are still very much ungoverned territories. And so I would really advocate that we, over the next year, link up with all the different stakeholders in the sector to really, discuss and agree what are these principles, what are the global standards, and what are the safeguards so that these partnerships can be conducted in the public trust, and that the outputs from them can be maintained as digital public goods. Thanks.
Thank you, David. There's definitely gaps that can be filled with partnerships as well. Richard, I'd like you to jump in on that.
Yes. Oh.
Whoever said yes, I didn't see, but they're very welcome to go.
No, please, Richard.
No, Alberto, you'll buy me some more time, honestly.
No, sorry. I was very surprised with David's intervention, and I definitely concur. As part of the previous question, David was mentioning about the digital public goods that is it's needed, and I think somewhat this particular alliance it's a network of partners from different sectors who contribute to the identification, support, and scale up of digital public goods. This is software, data, content, and algorithms in order to advance the SDGs. And I would like to quote an example that the head of that Christopher Fabian, head of the UNICEF Innovation Department, usually brings, which is he highlights that out of the top 100 websites in the internet, 99 are commercial websites are actually just looking for profit, while just one of them, Wikipedia, is the only public digital good. So this alliance was recognized as part of the Secretary General roadmap for digital transformation, And this is just an example of, and bringing also what David was saying, to try to convey these public-private partnerships, but also to look deeper into into the standards and how to instrumentalize these partnerships. Because it's important to highlight that despite the fact that the United Nations, for instance, has been investing a lot of efforts to improve their knowledge about innovation and about digital technology, it's also true that the United Nations, as well as another international organizations, has a significant lower progress or compared to their counterparts in the private sector. So this is really important to leverage from these partnerships, but at the same time try to balance somehow this strike a balance between these two.
Alberto, sorry, Richard, before you jump in, Alberto, you said I surprised you, but I wasn't sure if that was a negative surprise or a positive surprise. Can you?
Positive.
Positive, great, thank you.
Very positive.
Fun, fantastic, thank you.
I'll just lean into what we just heard, actually, maybe a little bit of a summary on that, if I may even risk that. David's example is a phenomenal example of partnerships. The Earth observations data, the collab between the UN and Google Earth, but others, Planet as well, Aries system. And what goes on there between having some raw data and being able to use that is phenomenal. I mean, the data interoperability that has to go on, the semantic web that has to be built to extract meaning out of it whilst maintaining privacy and security, technologically incredible. I'm blown away every time I look at that. The mention there by Sasha was on language. And that's the thing that I've been most aware of is when we take a city like Toronto in Canada, they kicked Sidewalk Labs out, right? Google, because they couldn't talk to each other. They couldn't really communicate about what data collection, data harvesting, data use was going to go on. I won't say which local council, but one here, they showed me their incredible new 5G data hub. It's useless. It is completely useless for attracting commercial interest. And I've told them this. And I've got some work coming up with a highways operator as well. It's the same question. This decade, how ready are you to be able to have these conversations? You think about anyone who operates highways, this one's in the UK, the questions they're going to get asked from a number of different parties about new tires and new operating models, digital convoys, speed limits, pollution, charging, the use of data, everything, they're not ready. And they've got to do it now, and the council's got to do it now. Otherwise, we're all just going to be like Toronto and set off with great intentions in mind and find that we do not talk the same language. And by the way, emphasis on tech, of course, there as well. We have to meet in the middle. We have to find those bridges to be able to do that.
Anna, you have a question for panelists as well?
Yeah, thank you very much, all of you, for your very, very insightful comments. And I want to continue on that question, about partnerships. And we also had the similar questions from the previous section, from storyteller section, that how can we reach the word to the students? And I want to expand this question, and also for our next event, because this is the event series, which is going to be held every 3 months. What kind of audience should we search for example, to spread the word? You mentioned private sectors, universities, and the government, but what would be your insight? Where could we start? And specifically, what kind of examples or solutions you could see? Probably this event was one of the attempts to spread the word about sustainable development goals and to kind of encourage partnerships and discuss these ideas, what actually different kind of organizations can do. And I also want to address Elina's comments that she's not AI expert, about that. Actually, that was one of the points, that it's kind of this event was kind of putting these different kind of backgrounds together in one place, like an AI background and a non-AI background, to kind of discuss the ideas how we can put these two fields together. So like where could we start, or which kind of organizations could we start to address to bring this information, existing sustainable development goals, and to raise awareness for them to kind of encourage partnership and contribute to 17th goal of United Sustainable Development Goals. Could you start, Dave? Elena, okay. Could you start with that?
I just had an idea. I mean, I heard of one organization that I'm not sure if it actually spread as far as it had ambitions to, but it's called the AI Commons. And the idea was that people could, I mean, anyone could bring forward a problem. For example, it could be an NGO or a government can have some kind of problem, like we want to, improve, reduce traffic or whatever problem it is. And then you would have kind of AI experts proposing solutions for the problem. And then also governments or companies financing it and finding like a common ground. And I thought that was a really good way of putting things together, because AI people are very problem focused typically, and they want to, already have the data, already have some kind of structure, but there's a lot of work to be done before that can happen. And so I think that bringing people around the table in this kind of multi-partite way is a really good way of approaching it. So I think that, any kind of sandbox environment where people can propose ideas and solutions would be, with some, of course, budget and buy-in, et cetera, would be really useful to moving the needle.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. I've heard of AI Commons, but I honestly haven't heard of many activities from the organization. So could you go on, David, probably?
Yeah, I like to, the world of AI and digital transformation is huge. And it's sort of like how long is a piece of string, right? It's infinite. And so I find it's really helpful to focus on use cases and to try to really zero in on what are the big sort of transformational changes we need to see in the world. And Richard's heard me talk about this many times, but I really feel that we should be looking at Amazon, the commerce platform, and really doing much more lobbying to get Amazon to include the environment and carbon footprint of every single product in the platform. That's 350 million products we should have access to in terms of their environment and carbon performance. And I think there should be a sort of a bottom-up movement of users to demand that from Amazon. Now, the good news here is that I've been saying this for the past year, and Amazon, I'm sure they're not listening to me, but they are taking some steps forward, and they recently launched this idea of the climate pledge friendly products. And so they've started now to look at how many of their products meet one of 19 different certifications, and they're starting now to basically feed that information into the platform. I think as things stand right now, there's 25,000 products that meet this certification. So I think people should be, buying those products, but I also think they should be lobbying and campaigning so that whole program is expanded, and so that the information that is available on the environment and the carbon footprint of everything. And so at the moment it's 25,000. They need to work up to 350 million, but they've taken the first step, which is great. So I think we need to be very supportive of that.
But on the other hand, it should be maybe less of Amazon's priority, and they should make it an obligation for people wanting to sell, right? Because, there's only so many products they can go through themselves, but if you make it an obligation, if you want to sell on Amazon, you have to disclose some number of things, then
absolutely
decentralize it.
No, and that's what Amazon will say. They will say that, look, we're not the experts. We can't calculate this, but exactly that. We need to make sure that data is available. So it's not totally in Amazon's court, and I fully admit that. And what's the way they solved that was to simply ask, okay, which products have been certified of these 19 certifications, which have been certified, and that's what they're giving us now. And that's the first step. But then we need to be able to say, okay, well, what is the actual performance of product X versus product Y? And the digital space will really allow that kind of calculation very easily, but that data is not available. And so we need to basically sort of start with what they're doing, but then expand so that as a consumer, I can eventually get that. And eventually I can then do filtering, and I can receive nudges, and I can really become a much more conscientious and sustainable consumer. But the point I wanted to make is they have taken a big step forward, and now other platforms should really be doing the same.
And if I may, they can. I've been selling on Amazon for about 6 years now. I have a six-figure business that sells products on there. They certify organic products, and they will kick you out and kick you off if you haven't managed to prove you're organic certified. They don't do it for sustainability yet. It's no harder. So yeah, the whole supply chain needs to be in place, but it's not difficult for them. Just put these processes in to verify what's already being claimed on there and celebrate it and promote it.
Can I just respond to that quickly? And this is where we talked about the European Union. The whole European Green Deal is potentially transformative in many ways, but the one thing that they're really focusing on is this idea of this digital product passport. And you'll probably hear me talk about this in other contexts, but the whole idea is that every single product that's traded in the European Union should have kind of this digital data pod that goes with it, this digital product passport. And that data pod would contain all the supply chain data. It would contain the environmental footprint data, the carbon data, the recycling information, the disposal routes, everything about that product, which would really then, once that digital product passport is functioning, that data could then be fed into platforms like Amazon. It could be fed into filters. It could be fed into procurement algorithms of governments. There's a huge number of potential applications. So now the big step is finding a couple of use cases and actually demonstrating proof of concept of how this might work. Because you can imagine the amount of data that needs to be fed into that digital product passport is phenomenal, and basically making sense of it, protecting privacy, protecting the security is going to be huge. But the vision is there, and I think it's something that we should really be helping to basically realize.
And I'd just add that we want to see that in augmented glasses as well, right? We want to be able to walk into a supermarket. David's laughing at me. We can't have a restricted Samsung, Apple, Google, whatever lens. There's got to be a Wikipedia-style openness to that, so that information is available in Tesco as it is in Amazon.
And if anyone wants to add, then we'll jump to another question.
Maybe
Alberto probably, or yeah, okay.
Yeah, can I just quickly? Going back to who do we need to talk to? Who needs to be part of that discussion? And for me, it's I'm thinking a lot these days about remote healthcare and how can we kind of scale up those technologies there? And for me, there's different parts to that. So one is the solution providers who are making these solutions. And my mind doesn't immediately go to Amazon. It rather goes to, kind of some of these startups and creators and founders who are on our platform. For example, we're working with an incredible company based in Uganda who've developed a really cool system of an AI-based kind of analysis to see where blood donations are happening and how you can increase blood donations and how the blood gets transferred between the right hospitals and labs and different blood centers. Or I'm thinking of, this kind of remote healthcare applications that enable like frontline health workers in India to be really going to remote with their iPad or their phone and then go and doing diagnostics. They may be community health workers who are not trained nurses or doctors, but they can actually perform a lot of those functions with these technologies. So I think you have to have those people around the table, and it's a lot about trust. Sasha was talking about trust before. It's trusting also the technology and understanding and educating the users. I mean, every technology is, none of these technologies is worth anything really if you don't have users who are willing to use them or convinced that they add value to what they're doing. So you need to bring the potential users of these technologies into the conversation to understand what their needs are, and also create the trust so that you're creating that kind of user base who are willing to take and adopt these technologies. And on the other side, you also need, of course, the governments and the policymakers, because without this being embedded for kind of the work that I do, without this being embedded in the policy work and in the public health system and in the procurement systems, then it's unlikely to actually go to scale. It will end up still being those, cool little projects here and there. So these are the people that I'd like to see in the future as parts of these conversations.
Totally, I completely agree. I would like to refer back to the example that David was also mentioning about the digital passport for each product. I think it was like that. I just want to raise here a couple of points regarding when we are trying to scale up, as Elina was mentioning, or replicating these models elsewhere. For instance, developing countries. This is always the risk of that maybe these models are not suitable for the conditions that are usually typically found in other countries. For this, I would like to refer to one of the comments that Josh Jackson did at the beginning on the first segment of this session. And he was just saying, yeah, well, probably using AI is not always the right solution. And he was just he was just saying we should be thinking or just reflecting on whether or not AI is the most appropriate solution for that. So I think this is definitely some of the things that we really need to consider when talking about and discussing about these initiatives as the digital passport or similar initiative for tracking, for instance, products across the value chains. And yes, I would like to stop here. Otherwise, I keep on and on.
Okay, thank you very much for your very valuable insights. I think that was a very interesting discussion today, and I want to jump to a last question and hear the answer from all the panelists. So the last question actually is kind of more about summarizing, and I want to hear the message from all the panelists. Like, what would you tell to current developer or the student or the company, how to start thinking about solving one of the sustainable development goals, or how to address to one of the 169 targets? Like, what would your one sentence message be to these people who actually want to contribute to solving one of these problems? Like, can we go on a circle? Probably start with Elina.
Wow, you're really putting me on the spot. I'm trying to think of one sentence out of everything, but maybe I would maybe go back to what we were saying earlier is really find the right partners. You're not going to get there alone. So if there's one thing that I need to pick out, find the right partners.
Great, thanks. Moving with David.
Yeah, I would agree with that, of course. Find the right partners and make sure whatever you do becomes a digital public good. So keep that public perspective in mind and really try to make it as open and accessible as possible.
Thanks. And moving with Richard.
Don't leave it too late to work out what kind of company you are. Don't wait until your Twitter size and realize that you end up with impossible choices like restricting freedom of speech or encouraging hate speech. Start way, way further. Don't wait till you've made it. Start early and get a culture that will see you through to the end.
Thanks a lot.
Can I jump on that one quickly? This relates. It's really important. And that is, every algorithm embeds values within it, right? And companies embed values and technology embed values. So make sure you're aware of the embedded values that you're putting into a technology, an algorithm, or a company right from the outset. So great point, Richard.
Great, thanks. And Alberto?
Yes, I will definitely agree on that and make it open, make it accessible, make it easy to use, which is mostly embedded into this digital transformation rules. I think they were embraced by almost every UN organization. And as just taking something that was mentioned by Sasha before, design with not only design with the potential adopter, but also develop the capacity of this potential adopter, not only for using, but also for adapting this innovation. Thank you.
Okay, great. And Sasha, your message to others.
It's a bit academic, but do your homework. I think people often think that something hasn't been done just because they haven't heard about it. So you would be surprised how many things already exist, and often finding how you can use your skills to augment what already exists can be more efficient than starting from scratch.
Thanks a lot. I think that was the messages to take, really, for the people who are really interested in sustainable development and putting these technologies together. Today, we are going to closing to the session. Unfortunately, Ramon is kind of interrupted because of connection issues, I guess. Let's see if he joins until we finalize the session. I just want to say the final words and very much thank you for storytellers and all the speakers, panelists who were today with us, like for 2 hours and 45 minutes actually, and for all the participants who stayed here to listen to all these amazing discussions around. I'm sure there is really a lot of questions around this topic, because the topic is really huge and it needs really a lot of research and observation. So that was the event was also one of the attempts to help contribute in this dialogue. And we wanted to invite you, everyone, the speakers and storytellers. Okay, Ramon is here, I see. We want to invite you, everyone, to our next session that will be in March. The exact date is not yet set, but we will make sure to reach the voice to you about our next session. The event is an event series, so it will be every 3 months. So make sure that you jump in to all the sessions that will be there in every 3 months, and we will try to jump in with the updates and with improvements, including technical, or hear your feedback or what you want to discuss in the next sessions. That would be awesome if you write us. I'm sure you enjoyed this session a lot, and I also want to thank to all the supporter organizations, United Nations institutions that were UNDP, UNEP, and UNAIDS. So thanks to the organizations and representatives of the organizations who were today here with us. And I want to give last words to Ramon as well.
Sure, thank you. Sorry for me for jumping in and out. Sometimes technology can be a bit lagging. So first of all, thank you so much for your time, all the panelists and the storytellers. It was really an interesting experience to organize this webinar series. And I'm so thankful that we're now here and sharing these insights. So yeah, last point, we have a WhatsApp group, a WhatsApp community group, and we will share our next episode in there as well. It was in the registration link on the bottom, so you can join our community as well. Of course, there will not be spamming. We will have regulations and rules on that as well. So be sure to join. Any interesting articles that are also going to be shared by the panelists and the storytellers are being in the WhatsApp group as well. So thank you so much for your time, everyone. And Anna, do you have any last words?
I just have to thank you once again and enjoy your evening or day wherever you are in the world. The attendance was very global, and we are expecting to collect more people from around the world to discuss the worldwide topics such as sustainable development goals and emerging technologies. Thank you very much, and we are closing the session right now.
Thank you, everyone. Ciao. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye and thank you.
Thank you. See you again.
Bye.
Thanks.